Alright guys, I'm Eli, and this is Money, and we're going to talk to you today about how to find a co-founder. Money and I run a network in Toronto called Founder Dating, which is a network for entrepreneurs to find co-founders. It's a network which is split 50-50, so 50% technical people, 50% business people, and we help people to find each other and actually start working on something together.
So a lot of you in the room are developers, some of you might be business people, and I'm sure a lot of you have your own ideas that you want to potentially start a new company with. And the question you ask yourself is, well, why would I want to look for a co-founder? And the answer is fairly straightforward. It increases your odds of success. So Anna Vitale at Funders and Founders published an infographic a few weeks ago that shows that the odds of a two-man team succeeding at their startup is about 40% greater than if you were to be on your own. And in fact, the two-man team is the optimal number, more so than a three-man, four-man, or onwards. So if you want to increase your odds of success, you go looking for a co-founder. A second good reason is that when you approach funders, whether it's angels or VCs, they typically like to de-risk their investment. And what that means is that when they take a look at the challenges and problems that are going to be faced by someone starting a new company, they typically don't like looking at having all of that loaded onto one person. And they like to look at teams coming to them because they know it increases the odds of success. But notwithstanding all that, there's actually a whole other reason. Perhaps you're somebody who has all the skill, drive, and motivation to want to be part of something from the ground level, but you don't have your own vision that you think is worthwhile running after. So you can start going looking for co-founders that have the great vision you think you can get behind, and we think that that's a perfectly valid reason for why you should be seeking a co-founder.
So people come to us at all different stages, and they start looking for co-founders at different stages. So we kind of formed a couple of ideas of when you should start looking for co-founders. From our standpoint, we think that you should be starting to look for co-founders as early as you can. And there are a couple of reasons for it, which some of them might be somewhat counterintuitive. Number one, as soon as you start something, you only have a limited amount of time before you probably kind of run out of steam and to continue pushing it forward. If you find someone to work with, if you find someone who can challenge you and kind of help you to get out of the lows and keep on pushing you, you can continue going further. You can also benefit from that person getting you there further. Another thing that is somewhat counterintuitive to what we found is that the further you get in your idea, the harder it gets to find a co-founder. And again, to us, it seemed strange because what we found is that co-founders actually look to be part of something new. They want to help formulate the vision. They want to help build something from the ground level. They don't want to come in 12 months or 6 months down the road. So the further you get along in your idea, the harder it actually gets to find someone who actually would want to work with you.
So you want to find a co-founder and you want to start early. That's great. But you kind of need to be prepared before you start down this journey. You need to be able to talk about what your assets are and why you would be of value to a new venture or to another co-founder. So what that means is you need to kind of sell yourself and you need to sell the skill set you have. So maybe you have been part of a startup and helped raise funding in the past. You might be a full stack developer that's done tons of development, built lots of apps, done lots of back-end engineering. You might have run a small business at some point, so you understand all about the nitty-gritty of what day-to-day execution means. You might even be somebody who has domain expertise in a specific area that's really hot right now. So you got to take that collection and you got to approach other people with that skill set. And knowing what your strengths are is really going to help you. But not only your strengths, you also got to know what your weaknesses are. You got to understand what your shortcomings look like and how you can perhaps formulate the ideal co-founder who can complement you. So that when you're going out there and looking for people, you find people who are able to make you better.
Right. So let's say you're all prepared. How do you actually start looking for a co-founder? More importantly, where do you look? What we find is that the best co-founders are people you're actually most likely working with already. Those are people you've already faced challenges with. Those are people you've already shipped products with. So your co-workers at the place you currently work. they're probably great co-founders. Go engage them in the conversation. People you went to school with, again, people you've worked on projects together, those are probably some of the best people you're going to find. Hackathons. We think hackathons are one of the best things to do because a hackathon forces you to ship something in a very set period of time, be it 24 hours or 48 hours. You learn a lot more by shipping with somebody else than you would over a number of coffees. We obviously think that last but not least is founder dating, which is a network where we help curate some of the people. We help find people who are actually at the same stage as you are, who are ready to start companies, who've actually done something in their past, not someone who hasn't done anything and just wants to start a company.
So when you start actually talking with people, you realize that you need to understand how to build a relationship. So when we're talking about co-founders, we're talking about people, irrespective of what kind of equity stake they're going to have in a company. We're talking about people who are going to be responsible for building significant and important parts of a company that's just started out. And the only way you can do that is by having trust in the other co-founder. Trust is like the platform on which you have to build everything. To do that, you need to approach each other as equals. You have to think of each other as people who can work together equally, as opposed to one of you thinking that you might be micromanaging someone else as a subordinate. You can't approach it that way, because the person who ends up getting fed up with that situation will end up throwing the other one off their back, and they want out. And that's going to lead to you failing. In fact, that same infographic that was published by Funders and Founders states that 62% of all startups end up failing because of co-founder conflict. And that's a really high number, and you want to avoid that. And the way that you avoid that is by making a good attempt at validating the relationship that you're going to try to establish. Go to the hackathons, work together, understand the idiosyncrasies and behaviors, desires, passions of this other person under stress, with deliverables, with timelines. It's the only way you're going to know whether you'll be able to deliver when it's really going to be the real deal. So make sure that you take it seriously, validate that relationship.
Right. So let's say you found someone. Let's say you found someone through one way or another, you validated the relationship. How do you actually talk to them about what you want to work on? How do you, I don't want to say convince, but how do you tell them the story? They think there are two components to it. They think, number one, it's about painting a picture. A picture of what the world looks like once you achieve what you set out to achieve. Be it, a better transportation system, or be it a better, computer game. Tell the other person how the world looks better once you achieve what you're going to achieve. Second, they think it's about showing the other person that you've actually thought how to get there. Have a plan. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be all nailed down, but it has to be, the more detailed you can provide in that plan that you've actually given some thought, the more convincing you're going to be to that other person. Again, that plan and that vision is not something that the other person will not modify, but showing the other person that you gave it a lot of thought, it makes what you're pitching a lot more interesting.
All right, so you've gone through the vision, and now you're really about what is it I'm looking for in the other person. And there are going to be all sorts of overarching things, like, for example, what is their level of commitment? How much skin are they willing to put in the game? Can I work with them for hours on end and still be productive? That's the stuff that the questions that you got to answer. But when it comes to the division of skill that we typically call technical or business, there are a couple of traits that we found are fairly important in early stages of the company. We're going to share them with you. Of course, there's caveats to everything we say, but here's the way we see it. If it's a technical person you're looking to approach, a question you want to ask is, can this person build real products at pace? It doesn't have to be the greatest product. It doesn't have to be the cleanest product. It doesn't have to be the most optimized product. It has to be a product that works with good design and sound judgment when it comes to the inevitable compromises that you guys will end up having to make. And if those things are met, and this person is someone who really loves coding, you're really on your way. So if you really think about it, in our opinion, output ends up trumping genius. Now, when you carry over to the business side, it's very similar. Business is kind of like this umbrella that we cram together all sorts of skill sets under. But the one skill that we think is really important at the ground level is the ability to sell. So when you think about selling, at the beginning, the traditional way you think about selling is, okay, I'm going to convince a customer to purchase a product or service that we've ended up building. I'm going to do the cold calling, I'm going to do the lead generation, I'm going to close, and get our revenues up, and that's really selling. Although there's a whole other aspect to it that you need to demonstrate in the early days, and that's selling to, for example, early employees that you're going to want to bring on board. What is our vision? Why should you look to join us? Same thing with investors, both angels and VCs. They want to have confidence that your vision as well as your team is really going to be delivered, and that's an act of selling. And last but not least, you got partnerships. People who are going to try to help you develop your revenue channels and make you more of a success. You need to be able to sell them on why it's worthwhile doing business with you. So we think this one trait is a great one to focus on when you're looking at the business-focused people as co-founders.
All right. So let's say you found someone you actually want to work with. How do you split the pie? So there are many approaches to this, and people think differently. People think 50-50, people think 70-30. Frankly, money and I are not going to tell you what to pick. We think it's probably one of the best exercises you and your co-founder can go through together. But coming to a decision where both of you feel comfortable about it, and both of you feeling that you can go execute now, and both of you understanding that none of you are short-handed. What we see from the people around us is no matter how they pick that relationship and how they split the pie, unless it's completely one-sided, if they succeed, everyone walks out happy. If they fail, well, it really doesn't matter which part of the zero you own, right? So, a couple of things about equity and a couple of things about splitting the pie. First of all, no matter what you do, you should have everyone in your company invested. What that allows you to do is basically you divide the pie 70-30. However, the person only earns that by staying with the company for X amount of time. What that prevents people from doing is leaving with 30% of your company after 2 months working together. Last but not least, we think that you should formalize that relationship. Be it a pre-incorporation partnership agreement, or frankly an email you send to each other with the details of what you discussed. Because that's the record that you're going to have with what you talked about.
We've taken the time to go over a lot of things that we think you should be doing, but we also want to share with you some of the common mistakes that we see co-founders making when they get to starting to work with each other. And there's only a couple I'd like to focus on. The first being that idea that you end up forming a relationship with each other without actually ever having worked together. We see this happen all the time, and it's really not a good idea. Because if you do not know the personality and behavior and traits of an individual, when shit hits the fan, you are going to be in a lot of trouble. Because if you are not aligned, you're not going to be able to maneuver and be agile the way you need to be. And believe me, things go wrong. Even the greatest startups you've ever heard about, things have gone wrong. The second thing is this idea of and it's related to the first point, glossing over other people's goals, their lifestyle, very important, their cash flow needs. Again, if you ever get into positions where you have to make critical decisions, and you are not aware of the kind of limitations that your co-founder has, you're not going to be able to pivot if you need to. You're not going to be able to need to go in a new direction if you have to. And we think that this is detrimental if you don't know these things. It's going to kill your company. And essentially, we're trying to tell you about how to avoid that.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to us. You're here. We're going to stay here for the rest of the night. This is our Twitter. Ellie says if you want to reach out to us on Twitter. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.